Hi, everyone. We're just going to give a few minutes for everyone to enter the room, and then we'll begin. It's like people are still joining, so
Okay.
just a few more seconds and we'll start. Okay, so it looks like quite a few of us have joined. I'm just going to start this off. Before we begin, I'm going to need to read this disclaimer. Pursuant to Pennsylvania law, individuals must be given notification at the beginning of any activity or event to alert them that this activity is being recorded. Therefore, this announcement shall act as your notice that USciences may record this activity or event. If you do not wish to have your participation recorded, or if you are under 18, please exit this event immediately. If you continue to participate in this recording, your consent to recording is implied. Please also note that by continuing to participate in this event, you likewise grant permission to USciences to use your image, likeness, and/or voice and reproduce them via any medium now known or developed in the future without any restrictions and for any purpose whatsoever that is consistent with USciences' mission. You waive any right to inspect or approve such use and agree that you will receive no compensation for the use of such words or images. Your participation in this event or activity is solely at your own risk. By participating in this event, you agree that USciences and anyone connected to USciences will not be liable for damages arising from personal injuries resulting from your participation in this event. You assume full responsibility for any injuries or damages you sustain and release USciences and anyone connected to USciences from any claims or damages resulting from your participation in this event. That said, thank you all and good morning. I would like to thank you for joining today to hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. Kosil Edwards. Dr. Edwards is the founder of nonprofit organization Empowering Single Moms, Inc., as well as the principal at William D. Kelley School, a Philadelphia public school. She is passionate about improving the lives of young people, single mothers, and the community at large through financial, educational, and personal empowerment. Additionally, she is an active board member of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, the Temple University Black Alumni Association, and Philadelphia Outward Bound School. We are so excited to have her here today to share her thoughts. Welcome, Dr. Edwards.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, if you are under 18, you gotta go. So if anybody is like a Dookie Howser, who is not yet old enough, over 18, you gotta go, because I'm certain that there are some really magnificent folks in the audience today who might be under 18, but we're gonna dive in. We're gonna talk about some grown people things. And I didn't even know that disclaimer existed like that. So thank you for that, Ms. Lowpower. So I want to thank you first and foremost for the wonderful introduction of the work that I try to do every day when I wake up, not just on MLK Day. And I would say, if it were up to me, I would probably introduce myself by simply saying, listen, I wash the feet of the community while educating multitudes on the lived experiences of single mothers receiving government assistance in America, or simply, I'm just the wife of a laborer and the mother of the Fantastic Four. So that's me at the core of my being. And most importantly, I believe and love science. So thank you for having me today. So first and foremost, I'm humbled to be in your presence this morning on this dreary Monday. yet fearless on the words that I will be sharing with you today. Forever grateful and mindful of the state that we are in our society, and to my ancestors who fought so I might be able to speak truth to power in all platforms, and especially on today. Today, I want to talk to you about a closer look at humanity, taking a closer look at humanity, almost in anthropology type of way, the science of humanity. So in 1897, there was a Dr. William McGee, and he wrote The Science of Humanity in the American Anthropologist Journal, which was a journal that came that was published out in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. And he wrote, humanity is a favorite theme. It's a favorite theme of poets. It's a favorite theme of philosophers, novelists, historians, those in drama, and moralists. The changes rung on the theme of humanity run the entire gamut of human feeling and thinking. The burden of humanity is caught in song and in stories, and they're crystallized in books. No sweeter ways have ever been sung, no grander scenes enacted, no nobler lines penned, and solely human nature that makes the whole world kin. The whole world kin, all related to each other. I want you to think about that for a moment as we dive into humanity, people. So there are a few things I want you to do this morning. Actually, it's three. Whenever I come to speak to a group of people, I always want it to be a learning experience. It's not a speaker speaking at a crowd. It's a learning experience where we talk to one another. So that's what I want you to frame our time together with. And I want you to do three things this morning. The first one is I want you to be intentionally reflective as you are in this space this morning. And that's not always easy when we consider the subject of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's not always easy to do because human nature allows us to shy away from what's uncomfortable. And sometimes experiences of others and others' perspectives become a little uncomfortable. So even through the discomfort, we're either going to learn or we're going to lie. Those are two emotions that discomfort brings. So even if something gets discomforting for you, remember, either you will learn from it or you will lie about it. The second thing I want you to do is grab a writing utensil and something to write on to capture what makes you wonder. What might you need to further investigate that I might bring up? Learning doesn't happen in a silo, and you all are real geniuses, so you already know that. Learning just happens. It's our internal wedding band. It's the thing that has no beginning and no end. So some things that I might say might cause you to wonder, might cause you to go a little further, might cause you to want to investigate it. And I know that's a word that you all use all the time. Just a little further. And I encourage you to do that. And number 3, take notes and let's go. Humanity. Humanity is defined as the compassionate, the sympathetic, or the generous behavior of disposition. It's the quality or state of being humane or human. It's the totality of these so-called meat bags that we're in, of a human being. Humanity is the human race, humankind, folks, people, kin, public, species, world. Okay, those are all our synonyms when we think about humanity. Humanity is also an anchor into behavioral science, right? In humanity, behavioral science shows us that people will act according to their nature, that children will live what they learn, whether that learning is rooted in racism, hate, privilege, love, kindness, forgiveness, lies, deceit, activism, and so much more. Whatever children are living, that is what they learn. Additionally, behavioral science also explains that adults will spend their adulthood making up for past childhood trauma in an attempt to correct what they learned in childhood that they realized was wrong. Racism, hate, deceit, ignorance, etc. In 2022, our humankind, folks, kin, people, public, society, on the 3rd Monday in January, celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. all over the country. Some will say all over the world. But let's take a closer look into the weeds. This monument of a man is celebrated like a fairy tale. Emphasis on tale, T-A-L-E, meaning that fictitious narrative of splendor or story, historical fiction, if you will, especially when it's recounted in an imaginary way. Dr. Martin Luther King Day can be viewed in 2022 as a delightful children's tale of Dr. Martin Luther King, the watered down version. In 2022, the tale of Dr. Martin Luther King, T-E-L-L, meaning the communicated information, the facts to someone that is spoken or written, and the brutal experience that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lived through has somehow been replaced with the more fictitious, almost childlike story. The brutal experiences of the strongholds of injustice that Black society was living under are on a track to almost be erased or looked at as though they didn't happen. Anytime a society, or as a society, we allow the horrors of slavery to be viewed as a community of laborers that were well fed and taken care of, we tip the hands of fate to repeat itself. Because one thing that we know about history, at certain times, it has the propensity to repeat itself. Anytime we argue or debate that enslaved people had a choice to be enslaved, we invite ignorance to be on full display. Anytime we, as humanity, the society, the kinfolk, allow a published children's book to be cheerfully illustrated that an enslaved White House chef, George, baked the cake, we've fallen short on humanity. When you let the hunter tell the story of a lion, the lion will always be at fault. The hunter will always be the victor because he feared for his life, even though he was in the jungle, which would be the lion's home. In this case, our humanity, our society's recollection or recollecting the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we are bombarded with this creed of love and how he always turned the other cheek when shrouded with violence. If the narrative was changed to reflect the lion's perspective or the truth of Dr. King's story, the horrors of fighting injustices would be in living color. You would fully understand that his death was his skin color. You would understand his nerve of using his voice for the voiceless. You would be clear on his audacity to fight a violent system of oppression by using nonviolent methods. You would be aligned in knowing that Dr. King did not die for his beliefs. He was murdered for that. He was murdered for the imagery of a society, a humanity where equality and equity, diversity, and inclusion were for everybody. He was murdered for illustrating that Black lives mattered equally, not just in servitude to a nation. He was slain because he believed in the intent of the Constitution. He believed we the people, everyone. He believed that forming a perfect union had to be not only established, but rooted in justice, domestic tranquility, and the blessing that liberty should bring for all, not just some, not just the majority, not just for those who could afford it, but for everyone. Humanity murdered Dr. King because he believed that all are equal. Since 1986, Dr. Martin Luther King Day is a day of humanitarian efforts. It's a national holiday that is observed honoring the achievements of Dr. King. Achievements that were rooted in his love for people. Achievements that were rooted in his fight for humanity. For all of his life's work, humanity took nearly 20 years to celebrate Dr. King. Legislation for this very day, this third Monday in January, was introduced to Congress in 1968, the same year in which he died, but it was stalled. Why was it stalled? Because of humanity. Even as a monumental human being whose light shined on fighting for the equity, the equality of the human condition for the good of all humanity, there was sufficient opposition on racial and political grounds just to stop and block the passage of a federal holiday for him. Even though this American citizen, this civil rights icon, was a Baptist minister who advocated the use of nonviolent means to end racial segregation, founded the Christian Leadership Conference, led the March on Washington in 1963, was the most influential Black civil rights leader during the 1960s, instrumental in getting the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, and even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Our humanity, our human condition said no. In 2022, is humanity any different from the days of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Has it evolved around those principles and those justices that he and so many fought for? Let's think on that for a minute. Let's take a moment of silence just to reflect on that question and write that question down. In 2022, is humanity, society, kin, folks, we the people, any different from the days of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? In 2022, I'm going to give you 3 major issues to think on when we look at Dr. Martin Luther King's era and when we look at where we are now. Same society, 2 different eras, right? In 2022, let's go over one thing. So we know that there was violence and injustices going on, and the weaponizing of police against Black communities was an everyday thing. In 2022, the weaponizing of police is an everyday thing. Police are weaponized against communities of color for the following things that our current humanity has shown us. And you can write these down as well, because I want you to be really reflective, even later on when you look back at your notes. So again, police are weaponized against communities of color for walking in their own neighborhoods while eating Skittles, jogging in the neighborhood down the street, playing with a toy gun, a simple traffic stop, asking for help, standing outside a corner store selling Lucy cigarettes, falling asleep at the Wendy's drive-thru, or simply sleeping in your own bed. All of these current situations are reminiscent of the civil rights era. And nothing has changed since the day of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's just being recorded. Number two, one of my favorite educational writers, just writers in general, Jonathan Kosil, who started in Boston Public School in 1964 and wrote his first book, It's Dark and I'm Far From Home. Jonathan Kosil wrote Savage Inequalities in 1991, where he highlighted the expanding educational gap in America. The educational gap continues to widen. Minority students are much less likely than white children to have 4 essentials that are research-based and shown to increase a child's educational attainment. Smaller schools. In minority schools, on average, the amount of children in the building are twice as much as they are in white neighborhoods. Smaller schools, smaller class sizes, receiving a challenging, up-to-date, research-based curriculum, and having highly qualified teachers who want to be there. And I stress, who want to be there. In predominantly minority schools, which most children of color attend, even in 2022, schools are large. And as I said, on average, more than twice as large as predominantly white schools. And some minority schools actually reach 3,000 students or more in most cities. Research Chicago. On average, class sizes are 15% larger in regular ed, and this blew my mind, 80% larger in special education classes, 80% larger. Curriculum offerings and materials are low in quality. And as I'm sitting in my school right now with a team of volunteers, what was on our agenda? To get rid of at least 10,000 pounds of old curriculum. from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s in my building right now. And teachers are much less qualified. When we say highly qualified, what are we talking about? What are the teachers' levels of education? Are they certified? And are they trained in the fields that they teach? If you taught reading and we had a vacancy, but we had 2 reading teachers and I asked you to teach math, would you feel comfortable in teaching math if that's not your subject? This is what happens in minority schools. We face that almost every year. Look up the number of certified teachers and the number of teachers in urban areas who have emergency certification. It will blow your mind. In schools that are integrated, most minority students are segregated into the lower track classes that have a larger class size, less qualified teachers, and lower quality curriculum. This has not changed in education at all since the days of Martin Luther King. The third thing is the income gap. In 2022, white families have the highest level of both the median and mean family wealth, anywhere from $188,000 to $983,000 a year. Black and Hispanic families have considerable less wealth than white families. Black families' median and mean wealth is less than 15% of that of white families. $24,000 and $142,000 respectively. Hispanic families are just a little bit above Black families with mean and median wealth. Theirs is $36,000 to $165,000 respectively. Members of humanity, today, this one day is a day to truly understand that cleaning oppressed neighborhoods, painting over graffitied walls, quoting Dr. Martin Luther King's phrases on social media, feeding the homeless, does not absolve anyone from turning a blind eye to the daily injustices of humanity for the next 365 days. If you can't do the human work every day, if you can't speak to injustice that doesn't concern you, then you become a part of the problem. We've all heard the historical times when humanity fell on deaf ears. And what do I mean by that? Well, the trauma to humanity can be the annihilation of people. And we've seen that in several occurrences. So I'm gonna leave you with this poem, and it just sums up humanity and why we need each other in a whole. First they came, and it was by Martin Niemöller. He was a prominent Lutheran pastor in Germany, and he was an outspoken public foe to Adolf Hitler. He spoke out. He was like a Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke against the practices of Adolf Hitler's and the murders, spending the last 7 years of the Nazi rules in several concentration camps. He believed, and I want you to listen to this word, he believed that German citizens had become complacent through their silence. They had become complacent through their silence of the Nazi imprisonment of Jewish citizens, the persecution of Jewish citizens, and the murders of millions of Jewish citizens. He especially blamed those within the Protestant church. I want you to hear these words that he wrote: the warning, the example of healing humanity and speaking up for injustice before the cost of human lives and the devastation to the society. First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Members of humanity at the University of the Science, we have to call a thing a thing. We have to be emboldened enough to call out injustice for all people, for everyone, especially historically marginalized citizens, without thinking that it will diminish or take away from something that we have, without thinking that we will have less power or less to gain. One thing we have learned from science is that extinction just doesn't happen to animals when no one speaks up. I encourage you to not become so complacent that you spend this one day doing good works for humanity and loving on humanity. I encourage and I ask of you to apply your goodness on this one day to the rest of the 364 days that are left. That is the challenge that I leave you with. That is the charge that I leave you with. because one day we will all want someone to stand up for us. But what happens when there's no one left? Thank you for your time today. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being reflective in this moment, in this space. And Ms. Lobauer, do we have any questions at all in the chat?
Dr. Edwards, we don't have any questions in the
Okay.
chat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to submit them.
I'm sure everybody was taking notes. That's probably why we don't have any questions. I'm sure everyone was studious.
All right, well, with that, I want to thank you, Dr. Edwards, for your remarks and your call to action today. We very much appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the rest of the group, although many of today's events had to regretfully be postponed due to switching to a virtual format, I invite all of you, if you have not already done so, to please register to participate in the 2 MLK Day virtual events that are being held. From 1 to 2 today, there will be a discussion hosted by the Black Student Union on COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and distrust in the Black and African American community. And from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock today, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council will be hosting a session featuring Dr. Nicole Stokes, the Associate Provost of DEI at St. Joseph's University, where she will be talking about current and future work on DEI at St. Joseph's University. I hope to see you all there, and thank you once again, Dr. Edwards, and thank all of you for attending.